Welcome, everyone. My name is Nick DiOrio. I've been here at NCS Manhattan since 2013. And just as an example of friendship, I was invited to come to this event in November of 2013, the Wednesday night before the first time I came by my good friend Andreas. So friendship is what we're all about here, and invite someone to come. We're closing out this season this month, but when we start up again in September, think about who would you want to bring into our fellowship, into our community. Today's speaker is a great friend of mine. I've known Stephen for over 8 years now. And before I get into his introduction, I'm just going to have a quick prayer for us and then open us in with Stephen. Let us remember that we're in the holy presence of God. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this new morning, this new day to come together in fellowship under the name of your Son, Jesus. We ask you that he shape our day, that everything we do today might be offered up to him as an eternal sacrifice, that our work, our conversation, our friendships, the relationships we have with our wives and brides might be blessed through him. We ask you to bless Stephen and in his work. We ask you to bless his wife, Evelyn, his 2 children, his 2 sons. We thank you for his vulnerability today, and we invite you to be among us in your Holy Spirit. And as we celebrate and continue to remember the Easter resurrection, we just ask you, Lord, to open our hearts to the reality that your sacrifice on the cross opened the gates of heaven for us. And we ask this through Jesus. Amen. Stephen Auth has been a champion and a legendary part of the Wall Street community for over 30 years. He is an Ivy League trained financial services professional. He currently is the chief investment officer at Federated Hermes. He's got a wife and 2 sons, but those are all accolades that he doesn't want me to talk about, because the most important thing to Stephen is the missionary work he does to bring people to Jesus. And he's done it here in New York City, in Soho. He's done it in Chinatown. He's done it all across the globe, including in Mexico. And the pride of Stephen's life is to tell people and communicate how Jesus saved him and how Jesus wants to save every person in this world. And so it's my honor to introduce Stephen Auth. Before I do that, just a quick note, there's a book in the back that Stephen just put out a year ago called Visions of the Divine. Make sure you take one if you haven't already. And Stephen has a new show coming out on something called EWTN, which, if you're not Catholic, is a great international Catholic broadcasting channel. And his show, Visions of the Divine, is 5:30 every night, starting
this week.
This week.
Yeah.
All right, so it's on right now. So please welcome Stephen Auth. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you all for being here and doing what you're doing, which we'll get into. Is probably one of the most important things you can do on your journey to the light. I put this presentation together. I've been doing most of my talks lately about our new book, Visions of the Divine, but I didn't think that was the talk you guys needed to hear today. So I took some paintings from it, but you'll see I want to talk more about personal witness, which is, I think, what you all want to hear. And just to start off, so you understand the background here, some of the folks you speak with, I'm sure, are what I would call, kind of born holy. And that's not the case here. I was certainly raised as a Catholic, but fell away from the faith in college. And by the time I was in my 20s, I was an indifferent agnostic, is the way I describe, which I think is the worst kind of an agnostic, by the way. And had slid off into the ether on Wall Street, married my beautiful bride, and she was Catholic, and so I started becoming a kind of Sunday morning Catholic kind of deal, but not really having a relationship with Christ. And in 2002, 24 years ago, I had a near fatal not a heart attack, it was an electrical malfunction. It's in the middle of the TMT bubble and collapse, and chief investment officer, you can imagine, stress was a little high. And I was in the intensive care ward for 12 days. They weren't really sure. I had a very unusual condition. They weren't really sure if they were going to be able to fix it, frankly. And a young priest came up to see me and offered me last rites. And within, of course, I accepted that invitation, thinking it can't hurt, you know. And he asked me if I'd like to have confession. How many here are Catholic? You guys are a mix of different faiths, I believe, right? But anyway, I'm Catholic, so we have the sacrament of confession, although I had not had the sacrament of confession in 20 years. But I thought couldn't hurt, And so we had this long discussion. And at the end of the confession, Father said to me, Steve, you know what the issue is here? I said, Father, if you could summarize it, I'd love to hear it. And he said, the issue is that the Lord gave you many talents, and you've been using them for your purposes, not his. And I thought about that, and I didn't exactly make a deal or anything like that, but I asked God, look, if I have a second bite at the apple here, I'm going to do this differently. And from that moment, my life changed, and I've been on this journey to the light ever since. I haven't arrived yet. We're midstream here. But I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my own journey to the light and how that journey proceeded. So the first thing, let's see if the clicker works. Oh, there we go. So how many folks have seen this painting in Rome? Anyone? The Chiesa dei Francesi, it's the French chapel. It's near the Piazza Navona. It's in the Contarelli Chapel in Rome. It's really Caravaggio's first commission to do a full chapel. And we don't have time today to talk about the three paintings, and they are itself a description of a journey. But this is the beginning of St. Matthew's journey. So St. Matthew is a guy that many of us can identify with. He's a tax collector. He's a money guy. And, in this time, the tax collectors were Jewish in the community who had money and who didn't. It was a cash economy. So the Romans needed somebody to tell them who's got the dough. And then that person would turn those people in, and they would get a commission. That's how they got rich. Okay, so that's what his job is, the tax collector. And he's having another dark day at the office here in his office. He's surrounded by folks that are, helping him. There's one guy here counting money, you can see. And suddenly, Jesus shows up. And he comes to the darkness and points at Matthew. And light from Jesus goes shooting across the room right onto Matthew's face. And this is what I call the phone call. And many of us get these phone calls, but we don't pick up the phone. I have reflected in my own life about all those times in my indifferent agnosticism that I literally didn't pick up the phone. And, one reaction is, it must be a wrong number. And that's kind of Matthew's reaction, right? Like, who, me? You can see him pointing to himself. And he's going, you can't mean me. I mean, I'm not holy enough for this job. And or he'll say, well, you better, why don't you, then he gives Jesus some advice. Why don't you pick him, right? This guy over here, as if we're qualified to give Jesus advice of who he should pick, right? And Jesus says, no, Matthew, it's you. And one of the beauties of this painting is, can you see the quotation? I think, on another topic, but I used the Michelangelo, and my wife said, Steve, they don't know the painting. I think you guys know the painting. It's in the Sistine ceiling. It's the creation of Adam. It's the most famous painting in the world, where it gets quoted all over the place. So this is Rome. It's 100 years after the Sistine is painted. Everybody knows that when he shows that finger of Jesus, he's quoting the hand of God here, creating Matthew anew. But Adam at least manages to sort of languidly, if you can imagine the painting in your head, languidly get his hand up to be brought alive. But in Matthew's case, it's even worse. It's like he's pointing, his finger, instead of pointing to Jesus, is pointing away, right? So this is this is the phone ringing. And by the way, it keeps ringing. But just a year after my incident in the hospital, I was called to help start a new men's circle group, sort of like what you guys are doing here, called the Lumen Institute. And it's been a wonderful blessing. I won't talk too much about Lumen right now. But then a few years after that, another financial crisis, 2008. So 2009, sorry. It's March of 2009. If you remember, the market tried to bottom at 820 level on the S&P, if you can imagine. We're at where we are today, 7,500. So it's 10 bagger off that level. And we had gone back overweight equities at that point, prematurely, unfortunately. And then when President Obama came in and ripped up the AIG contracts, which started having people think, oh my gosh, this is the end of capitalism, where the government's ripping up contracts that it made, the market nosedived to 666. So in the midst of this chaos, the wife calls. Steve. I go, yes, sweetie. Okay, I'm in a hotel room in Pittsburgh. It's like 9 o'clock, and I'm exhausted. Steve, I've signed us up to do a mission. I go, what, sweetie? A mission. You know how to do missions. You've been doing these missions in Mexico. I had been going to Mexico doing missions. I go, yeah, well, where are we doing this mission, sweetheart? In New York. In New York, she says. I go, where, on the streets? She goes, yes, exactly, Steve. I go, sweetie, what are we going to do? Go out looking for Catholics? And she goes, that's it, Steve. I go, sweetheart, do you understand? She goes, you know how to do this. You go to Mexico. I go, sweetie, you don't understand. Like, in Mexico, everybody is Catholic. In New York, nobody is Catholic. Like, this is going to be a disaster. They'll be putting cigars out in my forehead the whole hour that we're out there. She says, it's not an hour. I told Father we'd do it for 3 days. I go, look, sweetheart, I can smell a legionary here, okay? You just tell whoever it is that came up with this bright idea, I'm not going, okay? This is a bridge too far. I'm not doing this. Okay, this is like another phone call kind of thing, right? And once again, I am clicking. And of course, 2 weeks later, there I am on the streets of New York, Holy Week. And it's going about like I thought. The first person I meet, I say, hey, are you Catholic? It's a middle-aged woman, looks kind of angry. She looks at me and says, you must be a pedophile. I had a group of teenagers with me. I sent one group to another corner. They came back with a bag of dog poop. And they said, Mr. Auth, we tried to give someone a rosary that you gave us, and this is what what should we do? I said, well, throw it out. I know. And, another group came back. They were on, I had sent them to Prince and Mott. How many of you guys know down Soho, Old St. Pat's, that area? So Prince and Mott is right on the corner of the street. And I had quickly, field general in me, had assessed that this was probably an important corner. So I had sent a group there. They came back and Mr. Auth, where should we go now? I go, what do you mean, where should you go now? I sent you to Prince and Mott. Oh yeah, but the hat seller's there, and he said we're really bad for his business, and we have to move. I said, look, this is New York City, okay? Nobody owns any street corners here, all right? You move 18 inches to his left, and you stay right on that corner. So, we eventually wrote a book about this that you may have heard of called The Missionary of Wall Street. It became a #1 bestseller for weeks on Amazon. And the story of the hat seller, there's all these stories and sub-stories in The Missionary. But one is how the hat seller is transformed over the years as he's forced to listen to all these stories. I mean, because we're having these street-side encounters with people about God, and he's gradually, year after year, getting closer to God himself. And near the end of the book, the hat seller actually hands 120 of his hats, his entire collection, to the missionaries. We have a lot of missionaries by then, and closes down his hat stand. It's kind of interesting. So anyway, answer the call is a good idea, And the important thing to remember is in the spiritual life, God doesn't call the equipped. This is what people get confused by. He equips the called. There's no task of a spiritual nature, frankly, that we're really qualified to do. Only God is. And you got to let go, let God. But starts with answering. All good things start with answering the phone. I like to ask folks, think of 2 situations in your life. One, where God asked you to do something. You heard what he wanted you to do, and you did the opposite. Then think of a situation where God asked you to do something, and you did it. Probably before you took those 2 actions, you thought it would be better to do the opposite. It would lead to happiness, blah, blah, blah. And the other was going to be a big sacrifice. But if you think about it, you almost always, in fact, always, if you did the opposite, it worked out really badly. And if you did what you were asked, it worked out really good. So try to focus on that when you answer the phone. Now, the second thing, in my own journey, which I think is really important, is to learn to listen in prayer. And here we have our friend St. Matthew again. This is by Guido Reni. And now we're at the other side of his life. So St. Matthew has now been transformed. This reluctant missionary, if you will, has experienced Jesus in a very special way and then been sent off. And he's getting old, and he starts to write down his gospel. And this is St. Matthew in prayer trying to write his gospel. And I just love the way the Lord has sent Matthew, this angel, who sidles up to him very intimately as they're engaged in this conversation. Like, Matthew's not doing all the talking. He's doing a lot of listening here, actually, as the angel is talking to him. And then Matthew's taking notes. So this is how we should pray. The way we've been taught to pray often is rote prayers that we recite. So we do the talking. And then when we're done with that, we do our Santa Claus list. Lord, I need this, I need that, help me with that, help me with that. These are all good. And the Lord told us to ask him for stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. And the rote prayers are terrific. Our Father, if you meditated on it, if you meditate on it slowly, is an amazing prayer. However, you also have to leave time to listen to God's voice. At first, that's difficult to do. We're used to doing all the talking. But if you just find a quiet place and learn to listen, you'll start to grow in your spiritual life because you start to hear the voice of God. Years ago, as I got going on this journey, I realized I wasn't listening enough. In fact, I still don't. I just like to talk, And my secretary, if you've ever tried to get an appointment with her, like, as an example, this morning, or yesterday, Maria Bartiromo called, wanted me to be on the show today. Mary said no. No, he's got this thing, which was a good thing, by the way. But she's got the day scheduled in 15-minute blocks. Certain meetings she'll give 3 blocks to, so it's 45 minutes or whatever. So that's the way she does things. And I said to her one day, Mary, you're not giving me enough time to pray. Well, Steve, you don't really have time to pray. I said, well, the thing is, whether it's St. Teresa or somebody said, I don't know, some great saint said, if you're busy, pray often. If you're busy, pray more. So I said to her, you know what? You do these 15-minute blocks. I don't care where you put it, but you put in JC time. That way, if the HR department checks, they won't really, it's not a violation. JC time. And I have JC time sprinkled around on my calendar. And then what happened with me over time was it began to be an ongoing dialogue. That's probably the best form of prayer, I think, in some ways, where I'm kind of constantly talking and listening, and God, like, what do you think about this situation? But it starts with making time for prayer and being quiet and silent in prayer, sort of like St. Matthew here. I think it's a good vision for you. So the other one I think is really important is taking a friend with you on the journey. This is a painting by Robert Zund. It's in a small town museum, St. Gallen in Switzerland. It's a different version of the Emmaus story, which is why I like it. Most of the paintings of Emmaus are the moment where Jesus breaks the bread and they recognize him. But the first part of the story in Luke is this journey through Emmaus as Jesus opens the scriptures. And Zund imagines this not as a dusty, dry, dark scene as it kind of was on the road out of Jerusalem. These 2 guys were kind of getting ready to give up and Jesus is chasing them down. But they're together. And this is very important. That's why what you guys are doing with this new Canaan Society is a really important thing. When we're trying to change the world, light the world, find our way to heaven in a culture and society that's not necessarily supportive of this idea, you need a friend for the journey. You can't just be a solo operator. And having someone with you just creates a fellowship in Christ. He's at the center of it. What I love about this, and pick good friends, by the way. My wife was giving me some advice on the way out the door, and I said to her, honey, that's going to be one of the things I'm going to tell the guys. Like, pick a good wife, But having a good friend, as opposed to a friend that's going to bring you on the journey to the darkness, you start to select your friends. I mean, in my circle, I basically only have friends that are either very faithful or that I'm trying to evangelize to get very faithful. And they're at least what I would call seekers, men or women that are seeking God, So surround yourself with friends like that, but always have a friend for the journey. When we really started getting going on the mission, once we had gotten through that first bumpy year and we kind of realized we needed a better plan here, I recruited, I call him Lumen number 2. They call me Lumen number 1. I was the first member of Lumen. But Lumen number 2 is a guy named Bob Infinger, who had become a close friend of mine in Mexico when we were doing the missions there. He stole my mission shirt, famously. So, but we kind of bonded over that, And he's never given me that shirt back, by the way. He kept promising it to me. He remind me, I got to get that shirt. But, Bob would always be with me down there on the street corner, back to back. And boy, a single missionary on the street is potentially just no. But when you have two, it's a community, and it changes the whole interaction. As you get rejected by people, you've got your brother with you. You're good. There are days down in Soho, it used to be, it's much better now, by the way, but, back in the early days, we would be 60 to 1 talking to people. So 60 people before you found one willing to have a chat. Not great odds. I was interviewed by Bill Bennett one day. Bill Bennett wrote the Book of Virtue. And he said, Steve, my staff's been going through this book of yours, and there's a lot of numbers thrown around in here. It looks like, you've talked to 3 million people over the course of the last decade or so, and you say somewhere else that you sort of got 250,000 people roughly to talk to you, and about 15,000 or so came back to the sacrament of confession after 30, 40 years and at least said that their life was changed. He goes, this is like, you're like a numbers guy, right? I assume you know numbers, achievement. This is like really bad odds. I mean, if you do the math on this, there's like a 0.05% chance of any given person you introduce yourself to that you're going to get them all the way home. I mean, this is seems like a big waste of time. And I said, Bill, for sure it's a low margin business. However, we make it up on volume. And he says, well, how do you do that? So I said to him, well, let's go through it. I mean, 3 million people. We don't know how they reacted. Some of them walked right by us for sure, but maybe some of them are thinking about God in a different way. 15,000, we don't know if any of them actually made it to heaven or going to make it. He goes, that's for sure. I said, they certainly had their lives changed. I mean, they're glowing. They have, people go through an experience like that thinking they're unforgivable and are suddenly forgiven. I mean, the power of that is amazing for people. I've witnessed it. But who knows? Maybe they fell away after that. We don't really keep it, we don't put a ring around their ankle or something to figure out what's going on. I said, would you give me, though, maybe 1,000 of them made it to heaven or are going to make it to heaven? He goes, I'm not really sure. I go, how about 100? Possibly. What about 1? He said, for sure, 1. For sure. I go, that's it. We make it up on volume. Because one soul is eternity. And last I checked, eternity or infinity times 1 is infinity, and we make it up on volume. So that's something to think about in this journey to the light. Like, we're meant to bring someone with us. And I always tell the missionaries every night, it could be you're here for 1 soul. And all of you in this room, you might be on this earth to help 1 soul get to heaven. And you may think that's a waste of time. Okay, they're giving me the hook. So much so that my clicker doesn't even work anymore. So, okay, go forth. This is a painting by Rubens, Peter Rubens, called Venus and Adonis. The story is Adonis comes down to earth, has a affair with Venus, the goddess of love. She's a goddess. And then the next morning he realizes, okay, this was a wrong turn. I got to get back on my mission. His mission is, okay, allegorically, he's a hunter, seeker of men, maybe, right? And he's heading out to the hunt. Now, Venus, a goddess, knows that he's going to be killed on the hunt. So she's trying to stop him. And you can see the way Rubens painted this painting, even though Rubens didn't even paint that face, by the way, of Adonis, which Rubens didn't think was important in this case. He thought the legs were important, because the legs show him planted moving forward. The face is actually avoiding looking at Venus, which is a good idea, by the way. Yeah, don't look. A priest always says to me, Steve, the first look's not your fault. It's the second look that's your fault, okay? So, anyway, he's going out. This is going forth on mission. This is what we're all called to do, into the fire. And, you know, that's kind of what this mission thing down in New York is all about. Okay, I don't have time for this painting. That's too bad. Think about this one, though. In this crisis where Paul is suddenly converted on the route to Damascus, look at the guy with the horse. Because people say to me, well, Steve, you know, I didn't have something dramatic, heart attack, I went blind at once, mission. I mean, all sorts of crazy things have happened to me, for sure. But they'll say, well, something like that didn't happen to me. And I say, well, I don't know. Maybe it did. Like, how many times in a crisis do we decide we're going to work our way out of it through what I call the white knuckle method? Persevere. I can do this. We're all type A's here. And you can, but you lose your joy and you lose your love. The Holy Spirit method, you look up to the light and let him get you through. So Paul's embracing the light. The guy, you see the guy with the horse? He's too busy solving the problem. The horse is about to run away. Something's happened to Paul. Something's going on here. I've got to fix this. He's not looking up to the light. He's looking into the darkness. He comes home that night and says, well, another day at the office, but it was kind of tough. I solved it, blah, blah, blah. Nothing happened to me. Didn't get any phone calls. Okay. All right, well, find your soul. That's a good thing to do. And there's 3 ways to do it. We talked about it, really. Formation, which is learning to listen in prayer, let God form you. Fellowship, take action. I want to say the take action part is so important. The real storyline behind the Missionary of Wall Street isn't the transformation of the 3 million people we talked to. It's about the transformation of the missionaries. When you take on a project with God, it doesn't need to be a mission on Soho. It doesn't have to be that crazy. But when you do something for him and with him, you get to experience his presence working with you. And the missionary is transformed. The missionary of Wall Street ends in a very powerful way, where this hardened Wall Street guy who had refused to even do it is completely transformed. Why? How? I mean, by being alongside Jesus and the Holy Spirit, seeing these miracles happen all over the place. We don't have time to talk about all of those miracles. They're in the book, Missionary of Wall Street. But you see at the end, this guy, now it's 10 years later, it's Thursday night, Holy Thursday, it's raining. The priests have already started to vest for Mass. There's no priest, no confessions. And he hears a voice in his head, like, stay on the corner. Makes no sense. Irrational request, similar in some ways to that first request. But this time, he doesn't even hesitate. He just stays on the corner. It must be a reason. And there is. And someone's life is changed. That's how the book ends. And that's what it's about. Okay, we're out of time. We're going to questions if there's time, or
I want to dial in on a couple things, and then we're going to open it up to our men to ask some questions. One of the great things I love about the missionary work is you're getting data, right? You're constantly hearing from the average New Yorker, the average person in Mexico City, and you're learning what is happening in their lives which tells us about society as a whole. What are some of the things you've heard over the course of when you started this mission work to the present that have changed in terms of what's on the hearts of the people out there, what they're struggling with? Give us a little color to what you hear when someone's coming to you on the street.
Well, you get all sorts of reactions. A lot of people just laugh it off. And and one thing that has changed is that has changed. Like this last mission we did, Holy Week this year, we were running about 3-1, and people willing to talk with us. And everyone had a smile. And maybe the missionaries themselves have become maybe more loving and more effective, I guess. But I think something's changing in the culture. People are more open. You get an awful lot of people who, I mentioned this earlier, who just think they're unforgivable. They've taken a wrong turn, and it's led down a slippery slope, and they don't think they can get back. And they don't think they want to get back, but they kind of do. They're almost hoping someone... there's this imagery in The Missionary of Wall Street about the wall. There's a wall around Old St. Pat's. But there's this idea of, people of faith today often hide behind the wall. It's safer there. We have our holy huddles. We go to Mass there. And in fact, society tells us, not in the public square, please. You can go do your thing behind the wall. And what's interesting is that the people on the other side, many of them have been pulled off into a life of so-called happiness by this culture, and it hasn't worked out. But they don't know how to get back over the wall. And so what they really are looking for, what Jesus wants to do, I told the missionaries, Jesus is out there. He's out in the streets. I know it's messy out there. I know there's, alternative lifestyles we're running into, and all these things. But that's where he is. And he needs us there to help him find these souls.
That's great, Stephen. Another place of mission work, I assume, in your life has been the office. A lot of us here in the room today are professionals of one kind or another. How have you taken, in the most appropriate way you can, this spirit of showing them who Jesus is through your work and through the excellence you bring to the office? Give us a little flavor on that.
Well, when we published the book, it was supposed to be called Delivered by Grace, with this idea. I mean, there's actually a guy in the book who's delivered to confession by a woman named Grace, and he says, I was delivered by grace, And but you realize at another level, as I kind of alluded to, the missionary is delivered by grace. And so it operates on these two levels. So about 2 weeks before we went to publishing Delivered by Grace, Sophia called me up with their entire marketing team. And Steve, we're...
Sophia Press.
Yeah, Sophia Press, #1 Catholic publisher. They were doing the book. And they said, by the way, on this working title, I said, it's not a working title. It is the title. It's Delivered by Grace. It's like, I've been working. And they said, well, we think the title should be The Missionary of Wall Street. I go, slow down here, guys. Like, there's a couple of problems with this. Number one, I'm not the missionary of Wall Street. I'm at best a missionary, and I would call myself a broken missionary of Wall Street. If you want to have a title, that won't work. And secondly, I'm either going to be fired or my staff, more likely, is going to shun me. And by the way, all these media, I'm kind of like the face of Federated, and like all these shows I'm on, I'm going to be knocked off these. They can't have me on there like some nutcase. And after a lot of discernment and talking over with the CEO of Federated, who told me, Steve, you know what happens to missionaries? I said, no, what's that, Chris? So, well, They usually end up face down in the mud with arrows in their back. But I went ahead, and I was prepared to retire if necessary. This was, 10 years ago almost now. But
That sounds like a phone call to me,
yeah, that was a phone call.
right?
So what happened instead was that I was embraced. The staff, who thought I was down there doing, running a soup kitchen or something, read this book and I'm going like, oh my gosh, he's deeper than we realized. And my relationship with the staff changed, and my relationship with the news anchors changed. I became like someone they could talk to, and I became friends with them. And you can see that, I think, if you ever see me on TV with any of them, you can sense that, and we just announced that I'm so-called retiring. I am retiring from my professional work at Federated in September, because I want to focus my last 10 years. I think I got 10 years of runway here. I'm 70. I'll be 70 on my missionary stuff. But, we announced that, and I've been getting all these incomings from the news folks, but all the people in the company. And the testimonies they've been writing to me have just been mind-boggling. It's been very fulfilling, It's like, wow, I mean, it did have sort of an impact here. And so I think it's worth it to be brave. I'm very ecumenical in how I treat people at work, for sure. I have to be, and that's how I want to be. I'm respectful of everyone. But love is pretty ecumenical. I sign my emails, Love Steve. I did an interview in Ireland a few years ago with sort of the Fox network of Ireland. I was out there on a board meeting, and they'd read about stuff I've done. And, the guy's going through this interview for 45 minutes. And then towards the end, after I'm warmed up, he said, Steve, I have one more question. I just got to check. This guy had done a lot of digging. He said, is it true you sign your emails at work, Love Steve? I said, well, look, I mean, you're misreading that. My guys know it's not eros love we're talking about here. It's agape love. They know that I will do everything in my power to help them succeed. And if they're not succeeding, they know that I feel it's on me to help them succeed. So that's what love is. That's the servant leader. They know that.
That's great, Stephen. Let's open up to questions. There's a couple things that I'll dial in on, but questions for Stephen this morning, gentlemen. Yeah, so here, Paul, and then Mark.
Thank you, Steve. Well, you started when the first time you did it, it sounded like your opening line was, "Are you Catholic?"
Yeah.
Has the opening line evolved over the years that you use with the missionaries to just define what's been most effective in that first interaction?
Well, I always tell the missionaries, use the pickup line that you're most comfortable with. Because in the other way, it needs to be a genuine encounter. That's the one thing New Yorkers will pick on right away if it's fake. So in my case, and many of the missionaries use that line because it's such a profound question, and people can react in different ways to it. But even, like, for instance, Catholics, if they say no, God help them, they almost always come back after like 15 minutes and say, hey, I got to tell you guys something. I am Catholic. I said no, but I am. And I said, well, now we have another sin to confess. And, you go from there. If they're not Catholic, or they'll say, I was Catholic, but, I found my own relationship with God now. And I'll say, well, how's that working? And usually the answer is not well. So I always tell the missionaries, ask questions. It's part of this listening thing, We're not out here to preach. We're not on soapboxes. We're just out there with joy and love in our hearts, the two things that converted an empire that we have that no one else has. We have joy, which is different than happiness, because we have confidence in eternity, in God, in the resurrection. And we have love in a deep, unselfish way, because that is what Christ came here to teach us how to do, and it's what we have. And no one else has that. They've got what they call love, but it's like one night stands, and it's shallow and it doesn't last. And when other New Yorkers see that, we had an interaction one night. There was a Hindu priest nearby, and I could see him there watching. I have like eyes on my back of my head in this situation. I'm talking to somebody, but I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be some kind of a confrontation, you know. And after there's a break in the action, he comes over and he says, you know, I've been watching you two guys now for about 15 minutes. Yeah, I know, Father. And he says, well, you know, I'm not going to get converted to Catholicism. I said, I kind of sense that. You know? He goes, however, I got to tell you, I've never seen anything like this. You two guys love every person that goes by this corner, even the ones that are putting cigars out in your forehead. This is really kind of amazing. And you guys should just keep doing this. So I do think that, and again, you don't need to be down in Soho banging, you know, getting cigars put on your forehead. I'm not asking you to do that. But if you do want to do that, let me know. Lonnie, sorry. But you can use this joy and love thing in your everyday circles, you know.
That's great, Stephen. Mark, did you still have something? And then we'll wrap up.
Thank you so much for your talk today. It was very impactful. I was just curious because the way you were describing the paintings and how you kind of related that to your story for evangelism, how did you get that started, and how did you know the stories behind it, and what was your process being able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very gradual. I resisted. I was pulled into it. And I didn't, you know, you don't really realize it until later how it all adds up. But I think the answer is to take it one step at a time, even when you don't know where it's heading. And just be open. Now, you need to discern in prayer, is this real? You know, if I had more time, I'd take you through a lot of those stories. But yeah, you have to discern, is this the voice of God or am I crazy? And usually you can sort that out by trying to figure out what you want to do. And if it's the opposite, you're probably in good shape. You know, like you got to make sure your motivation is pure. And you got to wait. You got to hear it again. I mean, I'm very stubborn, so I keep getting, like, one of the books I'm writing right now, because I'm leaving Federated, I promised this to so many people, but I'm working on this one with Catholic University Press. It's called Humility at the Highs, 5 Decades of Riding the Bull, Fighting the Bear, and Chasing Heaven. And it was always going to be 40 years, 40 lessons, Steve's little ditties of how to survive in the markets. And the more I prayed on it, the more I kept saying, I don't feel like I want to write another book about how to make money. And I just was never comfortable, even though I had it all written in a way in my head. But what I finally figured out was that it was these spiritual lessons that even I wasn't aware of at the time that were happening within those crises that I had managed through that are more impactful and more powerful. So the book is a kind of combination of these, investment lessons with the spiritual, like humility at the highs, which is the title of the book, Humility at the Highs, confidence at the lows, integrity always. These kinds of lessons make a lot of sense in the investment business, but are critical. critical to the spiritual life.
All right. You want to do one more quick one?
Sure.
We'll do one more quick
Has to be
question and
quick.
answer.
Yeah, quick question. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak for us. I mean, I'm sure you kind of described yourself as broken missionary, and during this missionary work, do you ever feel like you have this kind of imposter syndrome of doing this kind of work and being like still not perfect yourself? And how do you kind of go through that and overcome that?
Yeah, I feel that all the time. I think if you didn't, you probably wouldn't be an effective missionary.
That's great.
And I go to confession. A priest once said to me, Steve, it's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. St. Paul knew that. He was not perfect. St. Peter was not perfect. I actually think, although I know there's some great saints that were perfect, but I do think the Lord kind of works very effectively with broken vessels because they know they're broken vessels. And you need humility to work with God. Otherwise, you think you know it all.
That's great. Let's thank Stephen one more time. So,
I have to just the mini series on the new book is going on right now. You can also get it on EWTN Plus, which is a streaming channel, and they're releasing it to Plus as each episode airs this week. So
that's great. So at your tables today, I think we can touch on three things. Number one, when did God make the call to you, and how did you respond? Like, that could be in the past, it could be recent. Number two, has there been a work of art, some kind of media experience that was evangelization to you, just like Stephen walked through these paintings with us today? And number three, who was a missionary in your life? Just describe that person, just remember them, pray for them, share that name or that person. Who was that missionary to you that brought you either a place like NCS or a deep relationship with Jesus? And so three things there to touch on at your tables today. Gentlemen, we're so grateful that you're part of this movement. Be a missionary in some way today, whatever that might be, whether it's putting love at the end of your email or whether it's just talking to someone on the street. Just make time for the Lord to be with you today. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Keep coming back.
It works if you work it.
All right. Thank you, guys.